I heard them laughing downstairs, light, careless laughter that had no place in a house built on the bones of 2 lifetimes. And for a second I thought I was dreaming, that the kettle's thin whistle had turned itself into voices. But the whistle went quiet, and the laughter went on. And then I caught a word I wasn't meant to hear. Signatures. The floorboard under my left foot has always clicked if I stand on it too long. So I stepped back, my hand still on the banister, and I breathed in the old scent of beeswax and laundry soap and the faint, sweet echo of last night's cinnamon. They were in the dining room, where the table sits under the window that faces the lilac bush. I polished that table after my husband Daniel passed, and I swore I wouldn't let it be the kind of wood that forgets the hands that touched it. I'm Margaret, Maggie to people who still remember the school fair with the lemon cake, and this is the only house I have ever wanted. I learned to keep a home here. I learned to be poor and patient here. I learned to be a widow here, and now it seems I'm learning what it feels like when your child lets a stranger write your life in ink while you stand on the stairs in your slippers. Tom doesn't laugh like that, not naturally. He picks laughter like he picks ties, careful and a little stiff. But today there was a looseness to him that made my teeth ache. The other laugh belonged to Jenna, my daughter-in-law with the shiny hair and the calendar voice. And a third voice, a man, cheerful, professional, the kind of tone that says, "This is routine," while he presses a pen into your fingers. I lifted my foot and felt the old bruise in my knee, the one from when I slipped last winter hauling firewood because the delivery boy was late. And I told myself, "Walk quietly, Maggie, you are not a ghost yet." The stairs were cold in that particular way our stairs get when the sun is bright, but the air is mean. I kept one hand on the wall and tried to listen without being seen. Every family has its special way of saying please and thank you, and I'm sorry. Ours has always been the clatter of cups and the small talk of weather. Downstairs, no cups clinked, papers rustled, a chair scraped. "Right here," the man said, an initial on the bottom of each page. I held my breath until it hurt, and in that hurt I saw the years lined up like laundry pins. Tom with the measles, Tom with the bent science trophy, Tom driving away in the dented blue car, Tom coming back after the layoff, Tom asking if he and Jenna could stay, "Just for a bit, Mama, until we catch up." I said yes because a mother's mouth knows yes like a prayer. Then yes became 1 month, 3 months, the garden fence fixed, the garage cleared, the office turned into a nursery even though there was no child yet, just the suggestion of one in every sentence. They took my room's lamp for their room, and I did not object. They put their shoes by the door, and I moved my shoes to the closet so the entry would look neat. They bought a sofa that felt like a rubber raft, and I kept my tongue quiet because they were so proud of the price. Tom said the property taxes were getting confusing and that online accounts were easier for him to manage. He knows the passwords now. I'm ashamed of how quickly I let that happen. A living arrangement, Jenna called it, as if we were worksheets. A win-win. I thought of my ring, the little gold band I sold when the roof needed mending the year after Daniel died, how the pawn shop glass smelled like metal and dust. I traded years for shingles, and I would have done it again. "What are you doing?" I meant to say it as I stepped down, bright and firm like the teacher I used to be, but what came out was a whisper that folded into the banister. I didn't want them to hear me yet. I wanted to hear them. The man's voice hummed. Transfer of deed, notarized. Standard waiting period. Congratulations. I counted the flowers on the hallway runner because I needed something to anchor me to the shape of a day that had started with oatmeal and reached for a newspaper that didn't mention me. 13 blue flowers, 2 worn to threads. The cat's dish was empty, and I thought of how Daisy waits by the back door for the birds, patient even when nothing moves. "She's upstairs," Jenna said, softer now, but not soft like concern, soft like caution. "She's napping. Tom made a sound. It almost wanted to be a word. But then the man laughed again and said, "No need to involve her if she's not on title." My knees became water. Of course I'm on the title. My name is everywhere in this house. It is in the pencil marks on the pantry shelves where I measured Tom's height and then forgot to stop when he left for college and kept measuring the air until the pencil wore down. It is in the mosaic of cracked plates I set into the garden path. During the summer, I could not stop crying. But paper does not care where your name lives unless it lives on the right line. I reached the bottom step and stayed there, a shadow on the wall, my breath catching on the little choke of dust that always rises when someone drags a chair. The dining room door was half closed, and through the gap I saw a leather folder and a pen with a gold nib, and Tom leaning forward the way he used to lean into birthday cakes. "It's better this way," Jenna said. "We'll handle everything. She can stay with us for a while until the new place is ready." New place. The phrase curled like smoke into my mouth. I pressed my palm flat against the wallpaper and found the familiar bump where Daniel once missed a nail and laughed at himself for being clumsy. So many times I have wished to feel his hand on mine again. Now I wished it so hard it hurt. I stepped into the doorway. The man was the kind of tidy that makes you distrustful, not a hair out of place, not a speck on his shoes. He smiled at me the way people smile at a receptionist. "Mrs. Weller," he said, "lovely morning." "Is it?" I asked, and I heard my own voice as if it belonged to a stranger who had moved into my throat. Tom's eyes flicked to mine and then slid away, guilty and stubborn at once. "Mom, we were going to talk to you after..." "After what?" I said. "After you finish reshaping my life like wet dough." I walked to the table and put my hand on the leather folder. It was warm, which meant it had been held by someone who had no right to hold it. The man cleared his throat. "It's all very standard," he said, "just signatures. The sale closes today." The word sale made my ears ring. I thought of my neighbor Ruth, who taught me how to prune roses without bleeding. I thought of the attic trunk with the letters Daniel wrote me from the drill site in '78. I thought of the blue plate that belonged to my mother that I will never see again if a stranger opens my cupboards. "The deed," I said quietly. "May I see the deed?" Jenna's smile had that tight shine it gets when she believes she is being reasonable. "It's complicated, Maggie," she said, like I was a puzzle. "The taxes, the penalties, the market. May I see it?" I repeated each word its own tiny hammer. The man moved the folder an inch, prepared for civility. I opened it fast enough to startle him. Paper, so much paper, numbers and names and printed paragraphs in a font that looks polite as it steals your breath. My name appeared, but not where it should have. "Tom," I said, and for a moment he was 8 again and had a frog in his pocket. "Did you take my mail? Did you take anything from the safe?" He hesitated, and in that hesitation I saw a thin path back to myself. I closed the folder and slid it toward me. "You don't take from a mother and call it help," I said. Jenna stood up so quickly the chair legs squealed. "We're not taking," she said. "We're securing a future. This place is too big for you. It's outdated. You're one slip away from breaking a hip. We found you a condo with an elevator and a view. 2 bedrooms. It will be easier." "For whom?" I asked. The kettle, forgotten, began to tick as it cooled. Outside, somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice, the same way it always barks at the delivery truck. Ordinary sounds, polite witnesses. I felt something old and stubborn wake up in me, the part that carried laundry baskets, when the washer broke and learned to make soup from bones and onions. I walked to the sideboard, opened the top drawer, and pulled out the blue envelope I had tucked there 3 weeks ago, the one from the county recorder's office that I hadn't told anyone about because the world has taught me to hold my small strengths close. I turned the envelope over in my hands to feel its weight and looked up at them, at my son, who would not meet my gaze, and at the woman who called herself practical. "You want to sell my house," I said. "Then you should know something." I slid my thumb under the flap, ready to pull out the letter that might yet be my anchor, because inside there was either my safety or my foolishness in ink. And just then, before I could unfold it, the doorbell rang, a hard official sound I have only heard twice in my life, the day Daniel's accident and the day the bank tried to scare me. Tom flinched. Jenna's eyes narrowed, calculating. The man smoothed his tie, but I was already moving toward the hall, the blue envelope in my hand, knowing that whoever was on my porch would change this day in a way none of them had planned. The bell's second ring sounded like a verdict, and I felt the old house hold its breath with me. I kept the blue envelope in my left hand and opened the door with my right, braced for a stranger selling something or a neighbor needing eggs. Instead, a woman in a gray cardigan and a badge on a lanyard stood on my porch with a younger man beside her holding a clipboard. No guns, no bark of authority, just faces that had seen this kind of morning before. "Mrs. Weller?" the woman asked. "I'm Karen with the county recorder's office. This is David. We left a message last week. May we come in?" Her voice had the calm of someone who knows where all the forms belong. Behind me, I felt the room stiffen. Paper rustled. A chair leg tapped once on the hardwood. Tom cleared his throat like a boy about to explain a broken window. I stepped aside. The woman's eyes took in my hallway runner, the family photos, the dent in the baseboard from a long-ago Christmas tree. She noticed what mattered, that this is a lived-in place, not a transaction. "We're following up on the fraud alert you subscribed to," she said. "There's been activity attached to your parcel number." She said the last two words like they were a bruise. "You received our notice?" I lifted the envelope. The paper had warmed from my hand. "I did," I said, and suddenly I was less alone in my doorway. We moved to the dining room like a small parade, me in front with the envelope, the county woman and her assistant behind me, and in the room, the man with the tidy tie straightening his back into a professional line. He introduced himself as Mark from Evergreen Title, which sounded to me like a Christmas story that forgot to be kind. Jenna smiled that glassy smile that never touches her eyes, and Tom stood with his hands at his sides like he'd misplaced a script he was meant to follow. The blue envelope caught the light. I set it next to the leather folder and slid it open. "Before we continue," Karen said, "I need to confirm who is on record as owner." She pulled a slim tablet from her bag, tapped once, and looked at me. "Our records show a transfer recorded 12 years ago. The survivorship filed when your husband passed. Current owner is listed as Margaret Weller, sole and separate." She looked to Tom and Jenna. "Any sale would require her signature." The sentence lay on the table like a measuring stick. Mark from Evergreen smiled too fast. "Of course," he said. "We were just in the process of oi." "No," I said, and my voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. "You were in the process of removing me from my life without asking me to leave." Tom's face folded, regret, irritation, embarrassment, all jostling each other. "Mom," he started, but his voice was small, and it made something old in me sit up straighter. I lifted the letter from the envelope and felt the thick county paper between my fingers, that serious kind of paper that doesn't wrinkle easily. "Last week," I told them, "your system sent me this notice about a document filed against my parcel number." I didn't recognize the document number. I called the hotline. They walked me through filing a temporary claim of interest so nothing could close without contacting me. "I was going to tell you," I said to Tom, and it came out softer than the rest, "but I've gotten in the habit of telling you last." Jenna's mask flickered. It is a delicate thing, the moment someone realizes a plan has been seen too soon. "We were trying to help," she said. "You'll thank us when you're settled in the condo." Karen shook her head once, gently. "With respect," she said, "no closing can proceed if there's a cloud on title. And a notarized deed without the named owner is not a deed. It's a story." She said it kindly, but the room heard the edge. "Who signed what?" she asked, looking at Tom in that careful way of a person offering a man a ladder out of a hole. Tom's mouth moved. He looked at me, and for a second it was August of 1994, and he'd come home with a bicycle he'd bought from a boy behind the gym, a bicycle that turned out to have been stolen from the custodian's grandson. He'd cried then, hiccuped and honest, and we'd walked the bike back together, and he'd apologized, and I'd made lemonade, and the custodian had forgiven him because a person who learns early how to make a wrong right carries that knowledge like a spare key. Tom didn't cry now. He looked older than I had let him be. The realtor said there was a way, he managed, but his voice tilted upward on way like a lost bird. Mark's professional smile thinned. We had a power of attorney, he said, limited for convenience. Convenience, I repeated, and the word tasted like a metal spoon licked too long. David, the younger county man, cleared his throat. If there's a power of attorney, we'll need to see the original, verify capacity and scope, and check for recording. We don't advise on family matters. He looked at me in a way that wasn't pity. But we do protect owners of record. Jenna leaned on the back of her chair, nails clicking. Maggie forgets things, she said, bright as air freshener. She loses track of bills. We've been paying the taxes. We made the place safe. She could break a hip. What a hymn, I said, and for a heartbeat I sounded like Daniel teasing me when I got too righteous. I forget where I leave my reading glasses. I do not forget my house. I turned to Karen. If I file a formal affidavit of claim, what happens? It delays anything that would transfer interest, she said. It signals to any escrow or title company to halt closing pending resolution, and we can place you on priority alert. Any document filed will ping us to call you before it's indexed. She paused. I'd also suggest you change your online county account password, Mrs. Weller. I felt Tom wince. A mother knows the small flinches her children think they hide. Did you open my mail? I asked, not as a dagger, but as a needle finding the truth. His silence answered, and something in me grieved and hardened both at once. The kettle let out a soft click in the kitchen, a small domestic ending to a long domestic morning. Tea? I asked absurdly, because I have learned that boiling water is a kind of prayer. No one spoke. I crossed to the kitchen, put the kettle back on the flame, and let the sound of it gathering itself calm the part of me that wanted to shout. From the doorway, Ruth's voice bobbed in like a buoy. Maggie? Is everything, oh? She stopped, taking in the badges, the folders, the faces. Ruth does not fuss. She has a way of putting a hand to her throat when she is worried. That reminds me of my mother. I saw the photographer last week, she said, words tumbling. He took pictures through your fence. I didn't like the look of him. I called my brother. He said to call the county alert line. So I did. She looked at me, eyes apologetic for having interfered. I hope that's all right. It's more than all right, I said, and I felt the floor under my feet as if it had been newly washed, and I could trust the shine. Mark began to gather his papers. He had the careful movements of a man planning to blame a system later. Given the claim and the presence of county officials, we can't proceed, he announced, aiming the sentence at no one and everyone. We'll need to consult counsel. Do, I said, and while you're at it, leave your card. Jenna's face closed. Tom's shoulders sagged, and for a second, just a breath, he looked relieved. Relief shocked me like cold water. Had he wanted to be stopped? The kettle sang. I poured water over tea bags like I was baptizing the moment. When I brought 2 mugs back, Ruth took one, and Karen took the other, and the 4 of us stood there. 2 women with badges, one with a cardigan and a neighbor's heart, and me with my blue envelope, as if we were the normal ones, and the others were passing weather. Mrs. Weller, Karen said, setting her cup down, after I leave, I'll file your affidavit electronically and flag your parcel for personal verifications. If anyone attempts to record, my office will call you directly. She nodded toward Tom. It would be wise to put all arrangements in writing, clear, witnessed, so you're never managing this alone. I have a pen, I said, because I wanted suddenly to do something clean. Tom stepped forward. Mom, he said, sounding like a man who has reached the middle of a bridge and realized he has a choice. I've made a mess. He glanced at Jenna. We thought. He stopped. I thought. I waited. Mothers are experts in the silence between a confession and the truth. I didn't think it would go this far, he said finally. We're behind. I was embarrassed. I told myself I was protecting you, but I was protecting the me that didn't want to say I'd failed. He swallowed. I'm sorry. A small, stubborn tenderness moved in me. I did not forgive him. Not yet. But the sound of his sorry found an old, soft place that had not died. Sit, I said, and he sat. Jenna did not. Her mouth was a blade. We can revisit everything, I told them, but nothing happens without me, and nothing happens today. Mark left first, shoulders narrow. Jenna went next, her steps the rigid click of someone who wants the world to apologize to her. Tom lingered. He looked at the blue envelope, at me, at the county woman and her assistant cataloging what needed to be done. He put his hand on the back of his old chair, the one with Daniel's nick from that missed nail. And for the first time all morning, he looked at it like it was part of his inheritance that could not be sold. A dent, a story, a place to sit and start over. When the door closed behind the title man, the house exhaled. Outside, a breeze lifted the lilac bush, tapping blossoms against the window like small, hopeful knuckles. I touched the envelope again. Inside, the paper that had felt like a lifeline now felt like what it was, proof that I am still the person who signs her own name. I looked at the clock above the fridge. 1 minute ticked to the next. Ordinary time returned in careful inches. And yet, under that ordinary, a new sound began, not the kettle or the floorboard or the dog down the street, but the quiet rearranging of a life that, for a moment, had been signed away while I stood on the stairs in my slippers and remembered how to be the person who says no. The house felt like it was breathing differently after they left, a slower, deeper rhythm, as if the walls themselves had unclenched. Yet peace doesn't come as quickly as silence. It lingers at the edge, testing whether it's allowed in. I stood in the kitchen, the steam from the kettle curling around my fingers, and tried to remember how it felt to pour tea without my hand shaking. Ruth stayed beside me, her hand on my arm. You scared them off, Maggie, she said softly, but I shook my head. Not scared, stalled. People like that don't vanish. They wait. And waiting, I knew, could be even more dangerous. Tom sat at the table like a boy again, shoulders rounded, eyes low, hands clasped as if he'd been caught sneaking sweets. He looked at me once, searching for some doorway back to forgiveness, but I wasn't ready to open it. Not yet. The wound was too fresh, the papers still warm from their fingers. Jenna had left in a storm of perfume and clipped footsteps, and in the space she left behind, the house seemed to sigh with relief. But I knew she'd be back. Jenna doesn't surrender, she sharpens. I poured tea into Tom's cup anyway, because a mother's body works on habit even when her heart hesitates. Drink, I said. He did, and the sound of him swallowing was so ordinary it nearly broke me. How many mornings had I set a cup down for him just like this? He looked older now, older than the son I remembered, yet so much younger in his shame. I didn't mean for it to get this far, he whispered. We thought... I cut him off with a look. You thought wrong. The county officers stayed a while, walking me through documents, showing me where to sign, where to keep copies safe. I learned new words, affidavit, cloud on title, priority alert, and repeated them quietly so they'd stick. They gave me a hotline number, pressed into my hand like a lifeline. Call us directly, Karen said. Day or night. Don't trust anyone who says they're here to handle things for you. You're the only one who signs. I nodded, though the weight of that truth felt both heavy and strangely comforting. After they left, Ruth insisted on tidying the cups, clattering in my kitchen as if to stitch back a normal rhythm. Tom rose, restless, pacing. He wanted to speak. I could feel it building, but I let him stew. Sometimes silence teaches harder than words. Finally, he blurted, "We're drowning, Mom. Debts, payments. Jenna thought if we sold now at a peak, we could cover everything and set aside a place for you. I knew you'd resist. I thought, if it was already done, you wouldn't have to worry." He stopped, rubbing his face. "I see now I was wrong." His voice cracked. So wrong. I wanted to scream at him, to ask how he could measure my life in square footage and market value, but the tears behind his eyes stopped me. I chose instead to speak low. "You don't save someone by erasing them, Tom. You don't honor a mother by turning her into a guest in her own story." He crumpled just a little, the weight of his failure pressing down, and for the first time, I wondered if Jenna's hands weren't the only ones pushing this plan forward. Maybe my son had carried his own desperation, his own weakness, into it. That night, when the house quieted and even the cat curled soft on my lap, I sat with the envelope again. I traced the raised seal, thinking of Daniel. He had always been cautious with papers, never signing without reading, never trusting a promise that came too easily. He'd told me once, "Our home isn't just wood and nails, Maggie. It's the years inside it. Never let anyone trade those years for cash." His voice lived in me still like a lamp left burning in another room. I closed my eyes and whispered back to him, "I won't." The next morning, I woke to the sound of Jenna's car pulling into the drive. Tires crunching gravel, a door slamming. I stayed seated at the table waiting. She swept in without knocking, her smile thin as glass. "Well," she said, "you made a scene yesterday. Do you feel proud?" Her tone was ice over fire. I lifted my cup slowly. "I feel present," I said, "and that's enough." She laughed, a sound that had no warmth, only edges. "This isn't over, Maggie. You're making things worse for Tom, for all of us. You can't hold on forever." I studied her face, the determination carved there, the hunger she tried to disguise as practicality. She believed the house was a prize, a solution, a ticket out. But to me, it was breath, memory, promise. "Forever," I said, "is exactly what I intend." Her jaw tightened. For a moment, just a flicker, doubt crossed her features. Then she turned sharply, muttering about calls to make, about next steps. I watched her go, but my chest ached. I knew then that this battle had only begun. Papers could be shredded, filed, delayed. But people like Jenna don't stop until they've either won or been exposed. And if Tom's weakness remained her doorway, I would have to guard him as much as I guarded my house. Not because he deserved it yet, but because I could not let him drown while clinging to me. The walls of my house stood steady. The lilacs tapped the window, and the clock ticked its faithful rhythm. But inside me, a resolve took root, stronger than fear, sharper than grief. They had tried to sign me away like an afterthought, and I had found my voice just in time. Now I would have to learn how to wield it, not only for my house, but for the life that still belonged to me. The days after that morning unfolded like threads pulled from a fraying cloth, quiet at first, but with every tug, I could feel the weave of my life loosening. I moved through the rooms with my eyes sharper, touching familiar things as though anchoring myself to them. The blue bowl my mother gave me, the worn handle of the teapot, the hairline crack in the hallway mirror. Each object whispered, "You belong here." But outside my windows, I felt shadows shifting. Jenna's car came and went at odd hours, phone pressed to her ear, voice clipped and secretive. Tom grew quieter, sitting long at the kitchen table, his coffee cold, staring at bills he no longer tried to hide. And I carried the blue envelope with me from room to room like armor, slipping it into my apron pocket even when I dusted. Ruth came by often, her arms full of muffins or soup, pretending it was just a visit, but I knew she was watching me as much as she was feeding me. One afternoon, she set down a casserole and fixed me with her steady eyes. "I saw Jenna downtown," she said carefully, "at the realtor's office. She didn't see me, but I heard her asking about expedited listings. Your address was on her lips, Maggie. She's not finished." My stomach tightened, though I tried to keep my face calm. "She'll find the doors locked now," I murmured. "She'll find me harder than paper." That night, I couldn't sleep. The clock in the hall ticked too loud, each second like a nail being driven. I got up, padded to the living room, and sat in Daniel's old chair. In the silence, I could almost hear him. "Don't let them take it piece by piece, Maggie. Hold your ground." I folded my hands and prayed, not for vengeance, but for strength, for the courage to keep my voice steady when theirs rose sharp. The next morning brought another tremor. A letter slid under my door. No stamp, no envelope, just a folded sheet of paper. In Jenna's handwriting, "You're making this harder than it needs to be. We found a buyer willing to pay above market. Think of Tom, sign, and we can move on with dignity." I stared at it until the words blurred. Dignity, as if mine was negotiable. I tore the paper in half, then in quarters, fed the pieces to the fire, and watched them curl into ash. Some battles, I realized, would be fought not with shouting, but with the quiet refusal to yield. Tom saw the ashes later. He bent down, picked up a charred corner, and his shoulders sagged. "She shouldn't have done that," he whispered. His face looked thinner, as though the struggle had begun to carve him down. "Mom, I don't know how to fix this." I touched his arm, and for the first time since that terrible morning, I softened. "You start by remembering who you are," I said. "Not Jenna's echo, not a frightened boy, my son. And my son doesn't sell his mother's life out from under her." He nodded, tears rising, but behind his eyes I still saw the trap of her influence, the net of her plans. Later that week, another visitor came, a man I didn't know, standing on my porch with a clipboard and a smile that never touched his eyes. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said. "I'm here for a property inspection." My heart thudded. I didn't request any inspection, I told him, my voice firmer than I felt. "Who sent you?" He shuffled his papers. "The buyer's agent," he admitted at last. "Said the sale was nearly finalized." Rage burned up my spine. "There is no sale," I snapped, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. "And you'll step off my porch right now." He blinked, muttered something about a misunderstanding, and retreated. I watched until his car disappeared down the street. Then I locked the door and leaned against it, shaking. They were moving faster, tightening the circle. That evening, Ruth and I sat together in the fading light. She took my hand and squeezed it. "You're not alone, Maggie," she said. "We'll make sure of that." She offered to call her cousin, a lawyer, someone who knew about property disputes and family betrayals. For the first time, I let myself imagine reinforcements. It felt strange, leaning on others. For years, I had been the one people leaned on, the mother, the neighbor, the widow who carried her burdens quietly. But perhaps, I thought, even strong walls need shoring up when storms come. When Jenna returned that night, her smile was sharper than ever. "You embarrassed us," she hissed, standing in the doorway, her perfume thick and suffocating. "Sending county officers, rejecting offers. Do you want Tom to drown in debt? Do you want him ruined?" Her words struck like stones, but I refused to flinch. "What ruins a man," I said, "is selling his soul for a shortcut. What ruins a mother is raising a son who forgets what home means." She glared, but I stood taller. For the first time, I saw her falter, just for a second, the mask slipping, the calculation cracking. After she stormed out, slamming the door, Tom lingered in the hall, his face pale. "She won't stop," he murmured. "You know that, don't you?" I looked at him, my son caught between the woman he married and the mother who raised him. "Then she'll learn," I said softly, "that I won't either." The house settled around us, the lilacs brushing the window in the night breeze, the clock ticking its stubborn rhythm, and in that moment I felt something harden inside me, not bitterness, not yet, but a resolve that reached deeper than fear. They had thought I would crumble, that age made me pliable, that love made me blind. But love, I realized, was my sharpest weapon. Love for Daniel, for the life we built, for the walls that had heard every prayer and every laugh. love for Tom, even in his weakness. That love would not let me sign my name away. And so, as the night deepened, I made myself a promise. Whatever came next, buyers, agents, Jenna's schemes, I would meet it not as a frightened old woman, but as the keeper of a house that still had stories to tell. And if they thought my silence meant surrender, they were about to learn that a mother's voice, once awakened, can shake even the firmest walls. The next blow came not with laughter or whispers, but with paper. A thick white envelope arrived one Tuesday morning, stamped with the seal of a law office I had never heard of. I sat at the kitchen table, the sunlight falling crooked through the lace curtain, and slid a knife along the top. Inside, a letter full of words designed to frighten: notice of intent, transfer pending, legal action, vacate. Each word like a cold hand pressed against my chest. I read it twice, then a third time, slower, letting the weight of it sink in. They had found a lawyer. They had dressed their betrayal in official language, hoping the formality of letterhead would do what their voices had not: silence me. I laid the letter flat, smoothed its edges, and breathed deep. Fear came first, hot and sharp, but beneath it something steadier rose. Paper does not own me, I thought. Ink does not erase years. I folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope, then tucked it into the drawer where Daniel used to keep the tools he trusted most: measuring tape, hammer, nails. It seemed fitting to hide their false authority among real things. When Tom came home that evening, I showed him the letter. His face drained, his hands trembled as he read. She said it would just be a push, he murmured. Just leverage. I didn't know she'd... His words broke. I watched him, my boy, who had once built a treehouse from scrap wood and pride, now tangled in debts and a wife's hunger. Tom, I said, there are lines you don't let anyone cross, even the person you love, especially then. He sat, head in his hands. I don't know how to stop her anymore, he whispered. Ruth came by not long after, carrying her lawyer cousin's card in her purse. You don't need to fight this alone, she told me. This isn't just about a house, Maggie. It's about them trying to take your place in your own life. Her words were firm, and for the first time, I felt the ground under me steady. We called her cousin that evening. His voice on the phone was calm, measured. Don't sign anything, he said. Keep every scrap of paper. If they pressure you, call me. People try these tactics on the elderly more often than you'd believe, but the law is still on your side. Jenna was furious when she found out I'd spoken to a lawyer. She cornered me in the hallway, her heels sharp against the wood. You're embarrassing this family, she hissed, dragging strangers into private matters. I met her eyes. Family doesn't threaten family with lawyers, I said. You drew that line, not me. Her smile was thin as glass. You think you can win this? You think anyone will believe you over us? She leaned closer, her perfume choking. We're your only family, Maggie. Don't forget that. Her words stung because part of them was true. They were my only blood left. But blood means little when it boils with greed. That night I took out old photo albums, turned the pages slowly. Tom as a baby, his first steps, his gap-toothed grin. I touched each picture with trembling fingers, whispering, remember, remember, remember. Not for him, for me. So I would not forget who he had been before Jenna's shadow fell across us. Days passed, each one heavy with watching. Jenna moved through the house as though she already owned it, rearranging things, boxing up what she called clutter. I caught her once carrying Daniel's old tool set toward the garage. Those stay, I said firmly. She gave a laugh, sweet and cutting. Don't be sentimental, it's just junk. I stepped closer, took the box from her hands. It's not junk if it holds a man's fingerprints. For the first time she didn't argue. She simply turned, muttering under her breath, and left the room. The lawyer cousin, his name was Michael, came by that weekend. A tall man with kind eyes, he carried a briefcase and the smell of rain on his coat. He sat with me at the table, spread the papers wide. and explained each step. They may try intimidation, he said. They may say you're unfit, suggest you can't manage alone, but unless a doctor declares incapacity, they cannot take this from you, not legally. His words were stones in my pocket, weighty but steadying. Tom listened from the corner, shame written all over him. At last he spoke. I let this happen, he admitted. I handed her the passwords, the accounts. I thought it was easier. I thought it was help. His voice broke. I was wrong. I reached across the table, laid my hand over his. Then help me now, I said. Stand where you should have stood. That night, I heard them arguing in their room, Jenna's voice sharp, Tom's softer, but growing firmer with each word. I couldn't catch all of it, but I heard my name, and I heard the word enough. I sat in the dark, listening, praying that the boy I raised was finding his way back through the fog. But Jenna was not one to retreat. The next morning, she announced with false cheer that she'd invited her parents over to discuss future plans. Her parents, cold, practical people who looked at me as though I were already furniture, sat in my living room that afternoon, sipping tea they didn't thank me for. It's not safe for you here, her mother declared. Big houses are accidents waiting to happen. Tom and Jenna are trying to protect you. Her father nodded. And financially, it's foolish to cling to property when you could liquidate. I sat very still, my hands wrapped around my cup. This isn't just property, I said. This is my life, my husband's life, the years stitched into every corner. Her mother waved a dismissive hand. Sentiment doesn't pay bills. I leaned forward, met her eyes with all the strength I had left. Maybe not, but sentiment is what makes a house a home. Without it, you're just walls and ceilings, and I will not be stripped down to empty walls. They left soon after, their disapproval trailing behind them like a cold wind. Jenna fumed. Tom looked torn in two. I closed the door behind them and pressed my forehead against the wood. The battle had widened. It wasn't just Jenna now. It was her whole family. Still, as I walked through the quiet rooms, touching the walls, I felt a strange certainty growing. They could bring letters, lawyers, even their parents. But this house had roots deeper than their greed, and so did I. That night, before bed, I stood at the window, the lilacs brushing the glass, and whispered into the dark. You built this with me, Daniel, and I swear to you, they will not take it. The house seemed to settle around me, the floorboards creaking like an old friend nodding in agreement, and for the first time in weeks, I slept without fear. The first knock came on a Wednesday when the light falls flat through the maple and turns the hallway to honey. It was not a neighbor's knock, too firm, too official. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door to two people in navy jackets with laminated badges. Adult Protective Services, the woman said, her voice soft in that rehearsed way that's meant to calm frightened animals. We've received a call expressing concern about your welfare, Mrs. Weller. May we come in? Her partner stood with a tablet at the ready, eyes skimming my porch like he was inventorying risk. Behind them, the lilacs trembled, and across the street, Ruth's curtain lifted the way it does when she's trying not to stare. I didn't move at first. In my chest, something small and angry fluttered its wings. From whom? I asked. The woman tilted her head, practiced sympathy. Anonymous, she said, and I could smell Jenna's perfume in that word, white flowers and acid. Are you alone? Do you have food? Do you feel safe? I thought of how safe had taken on a new shape lately, how it meant keeping papers in a tin by the flour canister and sleeping with my phone on the nightstand. I stepped aside. Come in, but take off your shoes, I said. I just did the floor. They looked surprised, but they obeyed, and I felt a wicked spark of satisfaction watching official socks cross the threshold. I led them to the kitchen, to the table where Daniel and I had learned how to be poor and still feast. The woman, her name was Carla, asked about my medications, the stove, the stairs, my memory. I answered each question in the same steady tone I used to use with students, clear, not cowed. When she asked me to recall 3 words, apple, table, penny, I repeated them back and then offered to do it backwards just to be petty. She smiled despite herself. Her partner Joel checked the fridge. Fresh vegetables, he murmured. Leftovers labeled. He moved to the stove, ran a finger along the knobs. No scorch marks, he said. Fire extinguisher is current. Of course it is, I said. My husband taught me not to set the house on fire as a hobby. Carla's questions turned toward money. Who handles your bills? She asked. I do, I answered, and watched her eyes flick to the tablet where some anonymous caller had likely painted me forgetful and feeble. My son helped me set up the online accounts, I added, but they're mine, and I changed the passwords. Joel glanced up at that. Good, he said simply, and something in me unclenched. They were kind, but they were thorough. They opened cabinets, asked about falls. I showed them the cane I use on bad days and the bath mat Daniel insisted on when he started to stumble. When they asked if there was anyone who might wish to influence my decisions in a way that concerned me, I said, yes. I did not say her name. They didn't need it. People like them build mosaics from small, careful answers. As if conjured, Jenna breezed in halfway through, keys jangling like a warning. Oh, she exclaimed, hand to chest. Officers, thank goodness. We've been so worried. She leaves the stove on. She forgets to lock the door. She fell last month, didn't you, Maggie? She looked at me with the bright, brittle pity of a person staging a play. We just want to keep her safe. Carla's face didn't change, but Joel's left eyebrow ticked. We've seen no evidence of negligence, he said, professional flat. Jenna laughed softly. Of course not. She's very tidy when she knows company is coming. I stepped between them before the woman could weave her web any further. Would you like to see my checklist? I asked Carla, sweet as Sunday tea. The one I keep by the door? I pulled the magnetized board from the side of the fridge. Lock back door, stove off, kettle off, keys, phone, glasses. Each item had a small smudge from my thumb. My neighbor Ruth comes by unannounced, I added, turning my head toward the window on purpose. Across the street, the curtain fluttered again. If I forget anything, she tells me by noon and scolds me by 1. Jenna's mouth flattened. She's being stubborn, she said, voice lower now, leaning toward Carla like a conspirator. We've found her a condo, elevator, doorman, activities. It's what she needs. Carla nodded politely the way mothers nod at children selling seashells. Then she turned to me. Mrs. Weller, would you consent to a cognitive screening with your doctor? It will help us close this out decisively. Her eyes were kind, but I heard the subtext. If you pass, we can shut this door in their faces. If you don't, I lifted my chin. Make the appointment, I said. I'll bring cookies. They left with their socks tucked back into their shoes, promising a follow-up. Jenna cornered me the moment the door closed. Why are you making this harder? She hissed. I let the hiss pass over me like a draft from under the door. Because you are trying to make it easy to take what isn't yours, I said. And because I am not a woman you shepherd out of her life with a brochure. She leaned closer, claws hiding under manicure. I could say you're combative, she murmured. I could say you lash out. They'll believe me. Old people get angry. I smiled back, small and sharp. So do daughters-in-law who want fast money. Something flickered in her eyes. For a moment, she looked almost tired. Then the mask snapped back on. We'll see, she said, and left, her perfume hanging like fog. That night, I called Michael, the lawyer, and told him about APS. He approved of the screening, suggested bringing a friend as witness. And keep a notebook, he added. Dates, names, what was said. Paper can't argue with paper. So I started a notebook, blue-covered, neat columns. On the first line, I wrote, Wednesday, APS visit, Carla and Joel. No evidence of negligence. Jenna present, pushed condo. Then lower. I remembered apple, table, penny, and I underlined penny twice because Daniel used to flip pennies into my apron pocket when he thought I needed luck. Ruth came over with a tin of ginger snaps and a look on her face that meant business.
"I called my friend at St. Matthew's," she said, referring to the clinic. "Dr. Shaw is gentle, but she doesn't miss much. She agreed to see you Friday." We made a plan. Ruth would drive me, Michael would meet us, and I would bring my list of medications and my stubbornness. On Thursday, as if to salt the air, another letter arrived, this one certified, the envelope stiff as a new shoe. "Petition for temporary guardianship," it read, names filled in. Petitioner, Jenna Hartweller. My breath left me in a thin ribbon. Temporary, the document said, like a polite hand on the elbow. For medical and financial decisions in the best interest of the ward. I sat down hard on Daniel's chair, the paper trembling. It is a strange thing to see your future reduced to blanks and check marks. I carried the letter to Ruth's, laid it on her table like a dead bird. She read it, jaw tightening. "She's accelerating," she said quietly. "Guardianship is a hammer, but it's hard to swing if the wood is sound." Her eyes lifted to mine. "We will show them you are sound." Friday came, bright as a bell. I wore my good sweater, the one Daniel liked because the color made my eyes look like I had slept well. Ruth drove. The clinic smelled like lemon and paper. Dr. Shaw was small and quick, with eyes that made you want to tell the truth. She walked me through questions and tasks. Draw a clock, subtract by sevens, remember 3 new words. This time, window, garden, spoon. Name the presidents backward if I could. I could do 3 before laughing and shaking my head. We talked about the house. We talked about grief, about the way people mistake a quiet woman for a weak one. At the end, she put her pen down and said, "If anyone asks me, I will say, you are competent to make your own decisions, and I will say it in writing." Relief washed over me so fast I had to grip the chair. I hadn't realized how much tension had nested at the base of my neck. Ruth squeezed my hand under the table like a message. "See?" Michael, waiting in the hall, smiled when we told him. "We'll file this with the court in response to the petition," he said. "It won't make Jenna go away, but it will make her work harder to be cruel." When we got home, Tom was on the porch steps, elbows on knees, looking like a man who had finally found a mirror he could not avoid. He stood when he saw us. "I didn't know about the guardianship," he blurted. "I swear it, Mom. She told me she was asking for a financial power to help with bills. I didn't read the forms." He closed his eyes. "I'm so ashamed." I believed him, not because I wanted to, but because shame sat on him like a damp coat, and I remembered how heavy it can be. "Then come with me," I said. "Monday, to court. Sit beside me, not behind her." He nodded, eyes bright with something like a vow. For the first time, his spine looked like it was remembering how to be straight. That night, the house breathed quieter. I made soup. Ruth stayed for a bowl, then 2. We laughed at nothing until our laughter sounded like relief. I slept hard without dreams until a crash woke me, metal on tile, then water hissing like a snake. I stumbled into the kitchen to find the kettle overturned on the stove, flame licking up the side, a dish towel too near. I grabbed the pot holder, turned off the burner, threw the towel into the sink, and opened the window, breath coming fast. The air smelled like scorched cotton and something else, staged panic. I looked at the stove knobs. One was bent, as if someone had forced it past its mark. I stood very still, listening to the house listening to me. In the quiet, a floorboard creaked by the back door, the one that sticks unless you lift as you slide. I moved slowly down the hall, bare feet silent, and found the door ajar by an inch. The chain still latched, but pulled hard enough to leave a bright, fresh mark in the paint. Outside, the lilacs were black against the lighter black of the yard. I closed the door gently and slid the chain back. Then I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook and a pen and wrote, "Friday night, kettle overturned, knob bent, back door chain stressed, no one else home." And under that, someone wants accident to be a character in this story. I made tea in the other kettle, the one with the dent Daniel put in it when he tried to juggle on a dare one Christmas. I
I sat and sipped the taste of metal and resolve on my tongue and waited for dawn. When it came, pale and honest, I called Michael and told him everything. He didn't gasp or sputter. He just went quiet in that lawyer way and said, "We'll mention it to the judge. And, Maggie, do you have a phone that can record?" I did. "Use it," he said. "Not for confrontation, for truth. If voices rise, let them rise onto the tape." By noon, Ruth had found me a small camera, the sort babysitters buy to watch cats. We tucked it high on the hutch, trained toward the kitchen. It felt sneaky, and I didn't like sneaking. But then I thought of the scorched towel and the bent knob, and decided some sins are merely strategies dressed in plain clothes. Sunday passed without incident, quiet as a prayer. Tom hovered, helpful, guilty, making himself useful with broken things that had waited too long. He fixed the loose hinge on the cellar door and replaced a bulb. He made coffee and didn't ask for thanks. In the afternoon, Jenna returned, brittle and brilliant, a woman whose reflection has always told her she is right. She demanded to know where I'd been on Friday. I told her. She laughed. "Doctors can be fooled by a good day," she said. "Courts are not so naive." She moved around the kitchen, opening drawers she has no permission to open, taking inventory of a life that does not belong to her. "This guardianship," she said, running a nail along the edge of the table, "is mercy, because otherwise you'll stumble into something worse." "What's worse than being erased?" I asked. She smiled without showing teeth. "Being pitied," she said, and something in her voice told me she knew that feeling too well. The little camera watched. My notebook lay open. The kettle stayed upright. The back door stayed shut. And I, an old woman who had learned late that no can be a holy word, stood in my own kitchen, small as anyone and as large as my history. The court date sat on the calendar like a red bead. Monday was tomorrow. I could feel the story gathering itself like a storm that finally means to break. I set the table for breakfast, lined up cups and plates, as if ordered things could protect me, and whispered to the house, to Daniel, to whatever listens, "Hold fast." Then just as I turned off the light, the doorbell rang. One long, insistent peal, not a neighbor's knock, not Ruth, a sound with paperwork behind it. I breathed in, smoothed my sweater, and went to answer, my hand closing around the knob like a promise. The bell's long ring still echoed in my ears as I opened the door, bracing myself for whoever stood there. It wasn't a neighbor or the postman. Two men in gray suits with clipped voices introduced themselves as officers of the court. "Mrs. Weller, we're here to deliver notice of hearing," one said, handing me a heavy envelope. His eyes slid past me into the hallway, like he expected to see a frail woman cowering. Instead, I stood tall, my fingers steady as I took the papers. They explained the basics. A guardianship petition hearing had been scheduled for the following week. "You'll need to appear in person," the taller one said. "Bring counsel if you have it." Then they left, shoes crunching the gravel with bureaucratic finality. I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing. Another envelope, another attempt to write me out of my own story. I carried it to the kitchen and opened it under the watchful gaze of Daniel's photograph. The words inside, capacity hearing, evidence, testimony, were meant to frighten, and they did. But fear can turn into fuel if you let it. Ruth came as soon as I called. She sat beside me, reading the papers with her lips pressed tight. "It's a gamble," she said. "If Jenna wins guardianship, she'll control everything, your money, your house, even where you live. But if she loses," she met my eyes, "she'll be exposed." Michael, the lawyer, arrived later that evening. He studied the notice, then nodded. "We'll fight. You've already passed your evaluation with Dr. Shaw, and we have her written report. We'll call Ruth as a witness. And Tom," he looked at me carefully, "where does he stand?" I thought of my son's shame, the way he'd said enough in that muffled argument. "He is torn," I admitted, "but I think he wants to make it right." Michael nodded. "Then let's bring him into the light." That night, Tom came to me, his face lined with exhaustion. "She says this is the only way," he whispered, "that the judge will see how stubborn you are, how unsafe this place is." He looked at the stove like it had betrayed us both. I put my hand over his. "Tom, listen. I may be old, I may be tired, but I am not incapable. You know this house holds me steady. If you walk into that courtroom beside her, you'll lose me long before any judge decides." His eyes filled, and he nodded once, like a boy at confession. The days before the hearing stretched thin. Jenna moved through the house like a storm contained by walls, slamming cupboards, muttering into her phone. Once I found her in the attic, rifling through boxes. She held Daniel's war letters in her hand, the ink faded but still alive. "These are worthless," she said, tossing them back carelessly. My heart twisted. "Worthless to you," I said, "but not to me." She sneered. "Sentiment won't pay the mortgage." I stepped forward, voice sharper than I intended. "There is no mortgage." She froze, lips tightening. She had counted on me forgetting that truth. On the eve of the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I walked the halls, touching the walls, as if they were rosary beads, each creak and scar a prayer. I sat in Daniel's chair, whispering to him, "Stand with me tomorrow, remind me who I am." The morning came gray and heavy. Ruth drove me to the courthouse, Tom in the back seat, silent as stone. Jenna arrived separately, flanked by her parents, her heels echoing like gunshots on the courthouse steps. Inside, the air smelled of dust and disinfectant, the hum of fluorescent lights sharp above us. The judge was a woman with steel hair and sharp glasses. She read the petition aloud, concerns about safety, memory loss, financial mismanagement. Jenna's voice followed, polished and persuasive. "We only want what's best," she said sweetly. "She forgets things. She leaves the stove on. She can't handle the bills. Tom and I are drowning in responsibility because she won't accept help." My hands clenched in my lap, but I waited. Michael stood when it was our turn. Calm, precise, he presented Dr. Shah's report, Ruth's testimony, the notebook where I had documented every visit, every attempt at intimidation. Then he called Tom. My son walked slowly to the stand, his voice shaking. "I thought this was help," he admitted. "I thought I was protecting her, but I see now I was wrong. My mother is capable, more than capable. She raised me alone after my father died. She managed everything. She still does. This petition, it's not hers, it's Jenna's." His voice broke on her name, but he did not falter. Jenna's face cracked for just a moment, surprise, then fury. She whispered harshly to her lawyer, but the judge's eyes stayed on Tom, weighing him. When he stepped down, he avoided Jenna's glare and came to sit beside me. His hand found mine under the table. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly, letting the silence stretch. "I am old," I said. "I forget my glasses, sometimes my keys, but I do not forget who I am. I am Margaret Weller. This is my house. These are my memories. I have made sacrifices for my son, for this family. And now someone wants to erase me because it is convenient, but I am not ready to be erased." My voice shook at first, then grew stronger. "A house is not just wood and nails. It is years, and I will not sign away my years." The judge looked down over her glasses, eyes steady. "Mrs. Weller," she said, "thank you." Then she turned to Jenna, whose polished mask was cracking under the weight of truth. The decision did not come immediately, but in that courtroom, with Tom's hand trembling in mine and Ruth's steady presence behind me, I felt something shift. Win or lose, I had spoken. I had not let them write me silent. And as we stepped out into the afternoon light, I thought, whatever comes next, they now know I will fight. The judge's decision came a week later, in a courtroom quieter than a church before dawn. I sat between Ruth and Michael, my hands folded in my lap, the blue envelope of county letters still tucked in my bag like a talisman. Tom sat behind me, shoulders hunched but present, while Jenna flanked her parents with a smile stretched too tight. Judge Hollis adjusted her glasses, her voice steady and sharp. The petition for temporary guardianship filed by Jenna Hartweller is denied, she said. My breath left me all at once, as if someone had cut a rope around my chest. The court finds Mrs. Margaret Weller competent to manage her own affairs. Independent medical evaluation confirms capacity, and testimony from both community members and family supports her ability to live independently. Furthermore, the court cautions against future attempts to undermine Mrs. Weller's autonomy without substantial evidence. Denied. The word rang through me like a bell. Ruth squeezed my hand, her palm warm and trembling. Tom exhaled loudly, as if he had been holding his breath for weeks, but across the aisle, Jenna's smile snapped in two. Her cheeks flushed scarlet. Her mother leaned in to whisper furiously, and her father sat stiff as stone, jaw clenched tight. When the session ended, people began to file out. Jenna rose quickly, her heels stabbing against the tile. She leaned across the table toward me, voice low, each word sharp enough to cut. You think you've won? This isn't over. I don't lose. Her perfume was heavy, suffocating. I looked up at her, and for the first time, I felt no tremor in my hands. Sometimes, I said, losing is what teaches us who we are. She straightened, eyes blazing, then turned on Tom. You betrayed me, she hissed, loud enough that heads turned, in front of everyone. You'll regret this. Tom said nothing, but he stood beside me, and in that silence I felt a small bridge being rebuilt, shaky but real. Outside, the autumn air was sharp with wood smoke. Ruth wrapped her scarf tighter. Michael packed his briefcase, and I tilted my face to the sky. The courthouse steps felt like freedom under my shoes. But freedom, I knew, was fragile. Jenna's rage was not the kind that burns out quickly. It smolders, searching for new kindling. The days after the decision were uneasy. At first there was quiet. Jenna kept her distance. Tom tried to make himself useful, repairing loose shingles and mowing the yard. But tension lingered, thick in the air. I found drawers opened. Little things moved where I hadn't left them. One evening, the garage door was left unlocked. Another morning, I found the back gate wide open, though I never used it. Subtle signs, like whispers meant to unsettle.
Ruth came over almost daily, her casserole dishes multiplying in my fridge. She's trying to rattle you, she said firmly. Don't let her. I smiled, though my chest ached. I've lived through worse storms, Ruth. If she thinks she can scare me into giving up, she's forgotten how long I've stood in this house. But even as I said it, I felt the weight pressing. One night I woke to the sound of glass breaking. My heart raced as I rushed to the kitchen, only to find a vase shattered on the floor. The window above it cracked. A rock lay among the shards, wrapped in paper. My hands shook as I unfolded it. In bold black marker, "Sell." I stood frozen, the word burning my eyes. Someone had thrown it in the night, bold enough to leave a message, but cowardly enough to run. Tom found me there minutes later, barefoot among the glass, his face drained of color. She wouldn't, he began, then stopped. Would she? I looked at him, my son caught between love and loyalty, and said, She already tried to make me a ward of the court. Do you think throwing a stone is harder than that? The next morning, Michael came and photographed everything. The rock, the window, the paper. This is intimidation, he said, and it's evidence. Keep it. He placed the rock in a plastic bag like it was a relic. If she escalates, we'll go to the police. Jenna didn't mention it. She walked through the house as if nothing had happened, humming while she poured coffee, chatting about bills. Her calmness was almost worse than anger. But I noticed how Tom flinched every time she touched his arm, how his eyes darted toward me like he was checking I hadn't vanished. Something was unraveling between them, though I couldn't yet tell if it was the rope that bound us all or the knot that strangled him. One afternoon I found him in the garden, kneeling by the lilacs. He touched the blossoms gently, as if they could answer the questions on his face. I don't know what to do, he admitted when he noticed me. I love her, but I see now, She doesn't love me the way you taught me love should be." His voice cracked, "And I don't know how to unmake the mess I've let grow." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "You start," I said softly, "by choosing who you stand beside every day. That choice builds you or breaks you." That night, Jenna confronted him in the kitchen. I heard every word through the thin walls. "It's her or me," she snapped. "I won't be second in my own marriage." Tom's voice was quiet, tired. "It was never a competition," he said. "You made it one." A crash followed, something thrown, shattering. I stayed in my room, clutching the quilt Daniel's mother sewed, whispering prayers for a son caught between fire and water. The house felt different after that, not defeated but braced, like an old tree in a storm, bending but refusing to break. I began keeping the camera on in the kitchen all the time, the little lens winking red like a guardian eye. I kept my notebook close, its pages filling with dates and words. The truth was my shield now, and I would keep it polished. And still, through all of it, I walked the halls at night, my hand brushing the wallpaper, whispering to Daniel's memory, "We are holding, love. They won't take this from us." The floorboards creaked back as if answering, "Hold fast, Maggie. Hold fast." But deep down, I knew Jenna's fury hadn't reached its peak yet. A woman like her doesn't stop at losing once. She sharpens her anger, looking for a new way in. And somewhere, just beyond the walls of my house, I could feel the storm gathering again. The storm I feared did not break all at once. It gathered slowly, heavy as thunder pressing against the horizon. For a few days the house was eerily calm. Jenna moved through the rooms without a word, her heels clicking like metronomes, her eyes sharp but silent. Tom kept to himself, doing small chores in the garden or fiddling with tools in the shed. Even Ruth noticed the quiet when she came by with her basket of rolls. "It's too still," she whispered, glancing toward the house. "Like the air before lightning." She was right. It began with the power. One evening, as I sat reading in the living room, the lamps flickered, sputtered, and went dark. The house sighed into shadow, and outside the wind picked up. I lit a candle, the same brass one Daniel had carried during the blackout of '85. The flame steadied my hands, though my heart thudded. Minutes later, Tom rushed in from the yard. "The breaker's fine," he said, breathless. "This isn't the grid. Someone cut the line." The words chilled me. I wrapped my shawl tighter, listening to the house breathe in darkness. Ruth arrived soon after, alarmed by the blackout on the street. When Tom showed her the severed wire near the side fence, her mouth tightened. "This isn't an accident, Maggie," she said firmly. "This is someone trying to shake you." I didn't say her name, but we all thought it. The next morning, the power company confirmed the cut. They reconnected us, but the warning lingered. I began to double-check locks twice each night. The little camera in the kitchen blinked its red light faithfully, recording everything. My notebook filled with careful entries. Wednesday, power cut. Wire severed. Tom present. Ruth witness. Paper and proof. My two strongest allies now. Jenna grew restless, pacing the halls. I overheard her snapping into the phone late at night. "We can't wait forever. She'll never agree. We need another way." Her voice cracked once, raw with frustration. Tom confronted her the next day, his voice low but firm. "Stop this," he said. "You're tearing us apart." I listened from the stairs, my heart breaking and swelling all at once. My son finding his voice at last. Jenna laughed, brittle and sharp. "You call this a family? She's poisoning you against me. If she stays, I go." The ultimatum hung heavy in the air. That night, Tom slept on the couch, and for the first time since they moved in, I saw Jenna's side of the bed untouched in the morning. But she did not leave. Instead, she struck harder. It was a Friday evening when the fire alarm shrieked. I was in the kitchen, the kettle just beginning to whistle, when smoke curled up from the hallway. Panic surged as I rushed forward. Flames licked at a pile of newspapers near the back door. Tom came running with a bucket, dousing the fire before it could spread. The air filled with acrid smoke, choking us both. When the last flame hissed out, we stood coughing, eyes burning. The pile of newspapers was not random. It had been stacked neatly, too close to the outlet, with an extension cord frayed on purpose. Ruth came as soon as we called, her eyes wide with fear. "That wasn't carelessness," she said, pointing at the singed cord. "That was planted." She glanced toward the stairs where Jenna stood, arms crossed, face pale but unreadable. "This house could have gone up in minutes," Ruth whispered. Jenna said nothing. She simply turned and walked back to her room, her silence louder than any denial. That night, Tom broke. He sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, head in his hands. "I can't protect you both," he said hoarsely. "She won't stop, Mom. I thought I could balance it, thought I could keep the peace, but she's dangerous now. To you, to me, to all of us." His voice cracked. "I don't know how to love her without losing you." I reached across, took his trembling hand. "Love doesn't ask you to erase your mother," I said softly. "And it doesn't set fires to prove a point. The choice isn't between us, Tom. The choice is between love and destruction." His tears spilled and he nodded, though the weight of the decision carved deep into him. The following morning, the police came. Michael had insisted we report the fire, and though no arrests were made, the officers' questions left the house tense and brittle. Jenna paced, furious at the intrusion. "You're turning this into a circus," she spat at me, "dragging police into family matters." I looked her in the eye. "Family doesn't light fires," I said. Her mask cracked then, anger flashing bare. "You think you've won because of one judge, one paper?" she hissed. "You haven't seen what I can do. This house will never be yours alone again. I'll burn it down before I let you keep it." Her words, venomous and unmasked, landed heavy in the kitchen. Tom stood in the doorway, hearing every syllable. His face went gray. "Enough," he said, voice trembling but fierce. "Jenna, I can't let you do this anymore." She spun toward him, eyes wild. "You'd choose her over me?" His silence was answer enough. The room felt like a battlefield. 3 hearts, 1 house, and a fire still smoldering in the walls. That night I barely slept. I sat in Daniel's chair, clutching his photograph, whispering prayers into the dark. The house groaned in the wind, the lilacs tapping the window like anxious fingers. Every sound felt like a threat, every shadow like a warning. But beneath the fear, something stronger stirred, resolve. They had tried signatures, letters, courts, lies, and now flames. Yet the house still stood. And so did I. I wrote in my notebook before dawn, "They will not erase me. Tomorrow the choice will be made." I didn't know then what tomorrow would bring, only that the storm had reached its peak, and when it broke, it would decide not just the fate of my house, but the soul of my son. The morning after the fire felt brittle, as though the walls themselves were listening. Sunlight broke through the curtains in weak shards, dust hanging in the beams like suspended breath. I had not slept. Instead, I sat in Daniel's chair all night, the photograph of him on my lap, whispering prayers into the silence. The notebook lay open on the table, the word fire written in bold black letters across the page. Tom shuffled in around dawn, eyes red, shoulders slumped. He didn't meet my gaze at first. He poured himself coffee, then stood there holding the cup like a child gripping a toy too tightly. "Mom," he said finally, voice cracked and raw, "I think it's over. I can't do this anymore." His words hung in the air, fragile and final. I waited. A mother learns patience in the long hours of fevered nights, of report cards, of heartbreak. At last, he looked up. "She's killing us all, you, me, even herself." His hands shook. "I'm leaving her." Relief and sorrow clashed in me, 2 rivers meeting in a violent current. "You'll be free," I said gently, "but freedom is never without pain." He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I know, but I'd rather feel pain than shame." We both jumped when the door slammed upstairs. Jenna stormed down the staircase, her face a storm cloud, her suitcase in hand. So this is it? She spat. You betray me, Tom? You side with her? Her eyes flared toward me, sharp as daggers. This old house will bury you both. Tom stepped forward, his voice steady for the first time in months. No, Jenna. This house is our home, and she is my mother. You wanted me to choose, and I choose her. I choose what's right. She froze, stunned by his defiance. Then her mask shattered. Rage poured out of her in a scream, words tumbling fast and cruel. You're weak, Tom. You've always been weak. I gave you everything, my youth, my plans, and you repay me with this? She turned her fury back to me. You think you've won, don't you? You think he'll stay your little boy forever? Well, take him. He's nothing without me. Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a heartbeat I saw it. Her fear, raw and naked. Fear of being left, fear of being irrelevant, fear of losing control. But then she snapped the mask back on, lifted her chin, and wheeled the suitcase to the door. You'll regret this, she hissed, and then she was gone. The slam of the door shook the house to its bones. Silence followed, thick and heavy. The lilac branches tapped the window as if to remind us the world still moved. Tom sank into a chair, face buried in his hands. Ruth arrived minutes later, as if she had felt the storm from across the street. She found us there, one son undone, one mother upright, one house still standing. She's gone, I told Ruth simply. My voice surprised me with its calm, not triumphant, not bitter, just certain. The days that followed were slow but healing. The police followed up on the fire, and though nothing tied Jenna directly, the whispers in town began to spread. Her name, once polished, now carried weight it did not want. Tom filed for separation quietly, his shame deep but his resolve firm. He began working again, picking up odd jobs, mending fences, literal ones, not just the ones between us. And me? I found myself walking through the rooms differently, not in fear, but in gratitude. The kitchen smelled again of cinnamon and tea instead of smoke. The garden, once trampled by arguments, bloomed under Tom's careful hands. Ruth brought laughter back to my table, her stories rolling like balm over old wounds. One evening I stood at the window, the lilacs brushing the glass, and whispered to Daniel, "We did it, love. They didn't take it from us." The house seemed to hum in reply, its floorboards creaking in gentle approval. I know storms will always come, bills, loneliness, the aches of age. But I also know this, I am not as fragile as they thought. My voice still holds power. My name still belongs to me. And this house, with all its cracks and scars, is still mine. So now I sit here, telling you my story, not as a victim, but as a woman who remembered how to fight. They tried to sell me away with laughter and signatures. They tried to silence me with courts and flames. But I am still here, and my home still stands. Did you like my story? From which city are you watching? Don't forget to subscribe. You never know when the next story might sound a little like your own.